Welcome, dear learners, to week 5, which is climate change poetry. As we discussed in earlier lessons, that climate has been dealt with a variety of genres and disciplines and subjects, and it touches human life in a variety of aspects. So, today in this course, in this lesson, we will talk about climate change poetry, and we'll try to define it. So, climate poetry refers to poetry that focuses on environmental issues, particularly global challenges created climate change. It includes poems that address the effects of global warming, deforestation, rising sea levels, species extinction, and human impact on the environment. So, all the things that are part of the climate impact, part of climate change, they are all in consideration of climate poetry, which is also referred to as eco poetry. So, if we just think about poetry on nature, it was not always climate poetry. There was poetry on nature from back from the 11th century onwards, maybe even before that, and it was not always about climate. So, traditional nature poetry used to celebrate beauty and the serenity of nature, but climate poetry highlights environmental degradation, ecological grief, and the urgency for action. Climate poetry aims to raise awareness about the critical state of the planet after expressing both the science of climate change and the emotional or ethical responses to it. So, where once poetry used to be talking about the beauty of nature, describing the flowers, it reminds me of the romantic poetry of Wordsworth, Ode to a Nightingale, Daffodils. It reminds me of the poetry of John Keats, talking about the nightingale, trying to immortalize the bird, or the poems by Coleridge, his poem on the rhyme of the ancient mariner about an albatross. So, at one time, poetry would be a celebration of the beauty of nature, but today, as human beings become more and more tech savvy, and as they become embroiled in this technology and commercial issues, life becomes more and more complicated. So, poetry takes that up, and then after all that, the impact of those lives on the impact of those of all the climate on their lives, and the impact of the lives on the climate. So, climate poetry aims to raise awareness about the critical state of the planet, and it uses figurative devices such as metaphors, images, personal reflections, similes. So, all those figurative devices, even symbols, are used to express the sorrow for nature, to express the anger for the destruction of nature, to talk about the loss of this relationship with nature. Even the poem by Wordsworth talks about this issue in The World is Too Much with Us, that the world, because we know around the 1850s, the impact of industrialization was there, and Wordsworth says that suddenly our relationship with nature is skewed, and we are pressured by ills of everyday life, by the pressures of technology and industry, and we are far away from nature. We are involved in earning money. So those feelings were there. It was not climate poetry. Romantic poetry was celebrating the beauty of nature, but the feeling was still there. And such poetry, which is about the environmental crisis, it encourages readers to think about their relationship with nature. What are the key features of climate poetry? They are focus on environmental degradation and climate change, incorporation of scientific facts or references, emphasis on ecological responsibility and human impact, expression of ecological grief and anxiety over the future, poetic activism encouraging readers to care for the planet, feeling the relationship and the link with nature very strongly. That is a part of climate poetry. Sorrowing for the loss of that relationship, sorrowing for what humans are doing to nature, and feeling that sadness very deeply, that too is a part of climate poetry. The beginnings. So, what was poetry like in the beginning? It was nature poetry, but what was it like in the beginning? So, let's go to the Anglo-Saxon period, that is around 11th century AD and even 10th century. We will find that it is literature of antiquity, and nature is in the background in most of the poems. Nature does not have so much of a voice. It forms the background, and in these poems, whenever there was a talk of evil, for example, in the poem Beowulf, there is a monster called Grendel, and his evil is described as a pagan kind of evil. So, pagan was anything that was non-Christian, and it was associated with nature worship. So, you can see the way nature was depicted. So, there were some poems in the Anglo-Saxon period that have many images from nature, and in this way the meaning can be drawn with the help of nature. So, Beowulf is one of them. Beowulf the hero and his fight with the monster Grendel, and so all the religious element in this poem is very strong, because Grendel represents darkness and evil. He lives in the marshes, in the darkness, in the lair. So we can see all the natural background, whereas Beowulf is the hero and he represents charity, goodness, bravery, all the virtues, and he is a king. So he will not be condemned to live in those places that Grendel lives. So the second poem is The Husband's Message. This poem is also important because nature plays a big role in it. And then another important poem is The Battle of Brunanburh. So let's go into these poems individually. The poem Beowulf is about a monster called Grendel. He is defeated by the hero Beowulf. There are many references to nature related to the sea and the marshes, as I just mentioned. And when Grendel wreaks havoc and destroys their hall of celebration, which was called the Mead Hall, there was always a bloodbath, and the soldiers when used to normally drink and celebrate and sing songs in this place. So it had become a bloodbath, and they refused to visit that place anymore because of Grendel. So Grendel was a monster who had come out from the marshes, and he had destroyed the Mead Hall, and the soldiers were very troubled, and the description of evil was this, that it was lurking in the marshes, and nobody could help because Grendel had wreaked havoc for about 12 years. So it was eventually when Beowulf comes, he manages to free them from this curse of Grendel. the husband's message. It's a rather mystical poem, and it could be the forerunner, or it could be at the root of later mystical poetry. So, for example, in this poem, the speaker is a piece of wood, and he is giving the husband's message to the wife, and they had separated long ago out of necessity. The husband had gone into exile. So when the wood is speaking, he is saying that my lord wants you to come back and cross the ocean. He is rich now, and he was very sorry about this, that he was exiled. He had to leave the land because of some political issues, but now he is well. So you go to the ocean's edge and you join him. So the ocean is, of course, very important here. The sea is very important. But the mysticism in this poem is that she will need to sail across the sea, or she will need to submerge herself in the sea to join her Lord. And one never knows whether the Lord is alive or not. Is the wood speaking, or is the voice coming in from her head? But still, we know that the speech is coming from a piece of wood. So we see that nature is a kind of medium to convey certain meanings in Anglo-Saxon poetry. And there are various synonyms given for the sea, such as whale road, swan road, ice cold wave. So we can see that nature figured, but figured as a means to convey some meanings, related to some events. This was a very important poem because the event was very important, the Battle of Brunanburh. This poem is about the first war fought on English soil that consolidated Britain as a country. And in this poem, there are references to various birds and animals. However, the reference to nature is only in the background. When the kings of England, they win, and there the battlefield is littered with dead bodies. The bodies are left for the vultures and wolves. So the reference is to the vultures and wolves that will eat the dead bodies. So you can see that they are part of the scenery, and nature is very much there, but human activity just needs its support, that's all. And there are no climate concerns over here. So this was the 11th century. Then there were, in this poem, the dark feathered, there are a few lines from this poem. The dark feathered raven, his horny beak, ravenous the grey feathered eagle with his white tail, a greedy war hawk, and that grey stalker, the wolf in the wood. So the colors of these animals and birds, the nature of these animals and birds is described through various adjectives, but still there is no sense of urgency about talking about their importance, and there is not even a celebration of their beauty. There is just nature as if there is a certain darkness about it, and these animals are there which are going to devour the dead bodies. Birds in medieval poetry. So birds and animals occurred in medieval poetry too, and they occurred in the Sufi work in the Middle East also, and in the British poetry also. So Michael J. Warren, in his book Birds in Medieval English Poetry, has examined the poetry of the Middle Ages for reference to birds. He makes mention of numerous seabirds referred to in the poem The Seafarer. The poem describes the hardships of the seafarer at sea, and his only companions are the seabirds. So The Seafarer was one poem in which there is this sailor whose life is spent sailing on the ocean, facing the hardships of the ocean, facing the cruel moods of the sea and ocean, and he sort of distinguishes between the life of those people on land who are comfortable and happy and secure, and the life on sea which is filled with adventure, dangers and threats. So there is a kind of equivalent drawn from the life of salvation, which is the life of the sailor who goes through all sorts of hardships, and the life of comfort and ease is the life, is material existence where one does not prepare for salvation. So the ocean and birds occur again and again, but they only play a side role. The historical context of nature in poetry versus contemporary climate focused poetry. So there was a historical context of nature, and whereas today it is climate focused poetry. What was the traditional nature of poetry? There was a celebration and connection with nature. Throughout history, poetry has maintained a deep connection with the natural world. In traditional natural poetry, poets often celebrated the beauty, peace and wonder of nature. Nature was viewed as a source of inspiration, solace and spiritual reflection. Romantic poets like William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge played a key role in idealizing nature, seeing it as a pure and sublime force that was untouched by human interference. So in this we have to remember the Lucy poems by Wordsworth. 3 years she grew in sun and shower. This girl who had been brought up in the lap of nature, she was pure and good and gentle, unused to the materialistic ways of the world. So this idealization of nature is there, in which nature changes every soul that comes in contact with it. So Wordsworth mentions in the prelude, in his major poems, he talks about his influences with nature and how nature controlled him and improved upon the quality of his soul, limited the evil tendencies in his self. So if you talk of about the Romantics, they use poetry to evoke admiration for the natural world and emphasize its spiritual significance. For Wordsworth, nature was a moral guide, and yet also nature was something that gave you peace, and it was meant for contemplation. And apart from nature, human beings tend to get lost in the commercial and material existence. What were the themes in traditional nature poetry? Romanticism, nature as a place of beauty, wonder and moral truth. Transcendentalism, which was in American poetry, a reflection of the divine and a path to self-awareness, such as in the poetry of Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau. Pastoral poetry, let's say it's a 17th century British poetry. There were idyllic depictions of rural life and unspoiled landscapes. So we have Thyrsis by Matthew Arnold, and we have some pastoral elegies also, where mourning is done through natural images, through the forest and through the creatures of nature, and through animals and flowers and vegetation. Nature poets often sought to preserve nature's beauty in verse, creating a harmonious relationship between humans and the environment, free from the ecological concerns that dominate contemporary thought. So that poetry, that traditional nature poetry, was so different from contemporary poetry. For example, William Wordsworth's poem, in the lines written a few miles above Tintern Abbey, celebrates the restorative power of nature, emphasizing the bond between humans and the environment. So it was Hazlitt, a great essayist, who said that Wordsworth could be extremely spiritual in his nature poetry, could be extremely inspired, and that was true when he wrote nature poetry. What is transcendentalism? Nature as a reflection of the divine, which was in Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson. With the growing awareness of environmental destruction and the rapid progression of climate change, contemporary poets began shifting their focus from celebrating nature to addressing its degradation. In the 20th and the 21st centuries, poetry became a medium not only for admiring nature, but for expressing concern, sorrow, and outrage at the environmental crisis caused by industrialization, pollution, and human irresponsibility. So, even in the 20th century, if there is a celebration of the romantic side of nature, but in many texts, even fiction, nature is still at the mercy of man, and man is the center. So this can be said about the occurrence of nature in the novels of Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. Nature and a fish figure prominently here, and the fish is that is supposed to be caught and conquered. So this idea of being conquering nature, this element was there in the 20th century writing also. So it's the present day idea of degradation, it was not there. It was, as Ghosh also says, that it was human centered. All literature was human centered, and nature was a kind of slave, a victim, or just a means to express meaning. Key differences in contemporary climate poetry. There is a focus on environmental degradation. While traditional poetry admired nature's beauty, climate poetry mourns its destruction, often detailing the harmful impact of human actions like deforestation, pollution, and overconsumption. Incorporation of scientific knowledge. Climate poets engage with scientific facts about climate change, using data and scientific terminology to explain the scale of the crisis. They translate this knowledge into poetic language to make it more relatable and emotional. So, using the fluency of their poetic language, using figurative devices, they transform scientific terminology in such a way that it becomes more powerful. It evokes the emotions of grief and anger at the destruction of nature. So here is a poem by Amy Lowell, 1874 to 1925. So this is the Victorian era that she was writing in, which was burdened by industrialization. And so in this poem, she talks about pollution, coldness and loneliness in an urban city. A London thoroughfare, 2 a.m. So it is early morning, it's 2 a.m., a rather dark hour when nobody's around, and she's standing at a window and she's seeing the street. And when she observes the street in this poem, we must pay attention to the images that she uses. Are they images of celebration of the beauty of city, or are they something else? Are they starker images that are mourning something? So she says, they have watered the street, it shines in the glare of lamps, cold white lamps, and lies like a slow moving river, barred with silver and black. Cabs go down it, one and then another. It's too bright. It has white lamps and glitters coldly. I stand in the window and watch the moon. She is thin and lusterless, but I love her. I know the moon, and this is an alien city. So we can see that there is something about the adjectives and images that she has used which show us that she's not celebrating the beauty of the city. She is expressing the isolation and the coldness. The cold white lamps, there is a coldness. They are white lamps, as if some were in a prison. And cabs go down as if they are traveling down a river. And again, light is too bright. It has white lamps which glitter coldly. So something could glitter in a festive and a joyful manner, but there's a cold glitter which shows something destructive, something evil, something fearful. And even the moon, she stands watching the moon. The moon is thin and lusterless. It has no shine because the city lights are kind of drowning it out. But I love her. I know the moon. And this is an alien city. So I know the moon. I love the moon. But this city is alien. So she shows her love for nature. But the city is sort of out of sync with nature. It is an alien. It is ugly. It is cold, lonely, unfriendly. So here in this early poem in the Victorian era, we can see the idea of the sadness at the destruction of nature coming in. Between them, I hear the shuffling of feet. Tramps doze on the window ledges. Night walkers pass along the sidewalks. The city is squalid and sinister, with the silver-barred street in the midst, slow-moving, a river leading nowhere. Opposite my window, the moon cuts clear and round through the plum-colored night. She cannot light the city. So, the state of the street is not a happy, lively street. There are poor people around. There are people walking in the night along, and tramps are homeless people. Squalid and sinister are words that show the miserable side of a city. And it's like a river, but it's not the natural river. The street is looking like a river, but it's not the natural river, which would be surrounded by flowers and grass and would be shining and would be life-giving. This river is in a miserable city and it moves slowly and it seems to go nowhere. And again she mentions, out opposite my window, the moon cuts clear and round through the plum-colored night. So the moon is round, but it is standing in a plum-colored night. Night is not dark. It is the color of plums, that is red of the color of injury, the color of sadness. So the moon is there, rooted in a injured world. She cannot light the city. So she has lost the power. The moon has lost the power to light the city because the neon lights probably are outdoing her. So you can see the concern about the destruction of nature and the squalid and sinister condition of the city with its poor people around and this dirty looking street. So let's move on. So there was a movement from pastoral idealism to ecological consciousness. So pastoral idealism is looking at the fields and the forest and thinking them as very benevolent and writing elegies also in keeping in mind the benevolence of nature. So I'll stop here for this lesson. We'll meet again in the next lesson. Thank you. I hope you learned something about how we introduce climate poetry.